Hello guys, welcome back to Africa Explored. Please subscribe and let's get into today's video. Alright, let's set the scene. Imagine two countries, France and Algeria, in a relationship that's already, let's say, complicated. It's like they've been on again, off again for decades, and they both have "it's complicated" as their relationship status. Then, one day, something happens that's so dramatic, it's like a season finale cliffhanger. In early 2023, a French-Algerian activist and journalist named Amira Bouraoui was in a bit of trouble in Tunisia. She was at risk of being sent back to Algeria, where she faced a potential jail sentence. Now this is where it gets spicy. Suddenly she pops up in Lyon, France. How did she get there? Well, it turns out she had a little help from some French consular staff and, according to reports, French Secret Service agents. Algeria was not amused, not even a little bit. From their perspective, France didn't just help a citizen, they orchestrated a covert exfiltration operation. It was like a scene straight out of a spy movie, but instead of James Bond, you have diplomats with stamping pads. Algeria saw this as a massive slap in the face. They called it a violation of their sovereignty, a sneaky move that undermined their authority. Think about it. It's like your neighbor sneaking into your backyard to rescue a cat you were planning to ground. You'd be like, "Hey, that's my yard, and that's my cat's business." The Algerian government immediately recalled its ambassador from Paris for consultations, which is the diplomatic equivalent of storming out of the room and slamming the door. This one incident, the Bouraoui affair, became the single match that lit a forest fire of diplomatic tension that had been smoldering for years. To understand why Algeria got so mad about one person being flown to France, you need a quick history lesson. And trust me, this isn't the boring kind with dates you have to memorize. This is the story of a very, very bad breakup. For 132 years, from 1830 to 1962, Algeria wasn't just a colony of France, it was considered a part of France itself, but not in a good way. It was more like France was the main house and Algeria was the shed out back where they kept the tools and forgot about the people living there. Algerians were not treated as equal citizens. Their culture, their language, and their identity were suppressed under a system that was designed to benefit the French settlers, known as the Pieds Noirs. This wasn't a peaceful arrangement. The colonization was brutal from the start, a violent conquest that stripped people of their land and dignity. Fast forward to the 1950s, and Algerians decided they'd had enough. They launched a war for independence, and it was one of the most brutal conflicts of the 20th century. We're talking about years of guerrilla warfare, torture, and mass casualties on both sides. The Algerian War of Independence, which lasted from 1954 to 1962, left scars so deep they're still visible today. For Algeria, it was a heroic struggle for freedom, a fight for their very soul. For France, it was a traumatic event that tore their society apart and led to the collapse of their government. When Algeria finally won its independence in 1962, the story didn't end with a handshake and a no hard feelings. It ended with 1 million French settlers fleeing Algeria and deep-seated bitterness on both sides. France, for a long time, didn't even want to call it a war. They referred to it as operations to maintain order, which is like calling a hurricane a mild breeze. This official denial, this refusal to fully acknowledge the horrors of what happened, created a huge memory gap between the two countries. Before the spy movie drama with Amira Bouraoui, the stage was already being set for a major fallout. The words flying back and forth between Paris and Algiers were getting sharper and more pointed. It's like the passive-aggressive texts you send before a big fight. A key moment came in 2021 when French President Emmanuel Macron made some comments that, to put it mildly, did not go over well in Algeria. He questioned whether Algeria had existed as a nation before French colonization. Oof, that's a big one. For Algerians, whose national identity is built on a long history of kingdoms and resistance, this was a fundamental insult. It was like telling your grandpa his whole life story is a lie. The Algerian government, led by President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, reacted with fury. So, while the presidents and diplomats are in their fancy offices having a war of words, what about the regular people? How do citizens in Algiers and Paris feel about all this? Well, it's complicated and it's not a monolith. In Algeria, especially among the older generations who lived through the war or grew up in its immediate aftermath, there's a deep and genuine sense of grievance. The showdown between Algeria and France isn't happening in a vacuum. It's like, well, two huge elephants fighting in a living room. Everything and everyone around them is going to feel it. The fallout has massive implications for the entire North African region, a place already dealing with its own set of complex challenges. When Paris and Algiers aren't talking, it creates a power vacuum and a wave of instability that affects their neighbors, from Morocco to Tunisia and Libya. Now, let's talk about a part of the world where this diplomatic feud is not just a headline, it's a matter of life and death, the Sahel. This vast, arid region just south of Algeria, encompassing countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, is ground zero for some of the world's most dangerous terrorist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. For years, France and Algeria, despite their differences, were reluctant partners in the fight against this threat. France had its military forces on the ground with Operation Barkhane, and Algeria used its powerful intelligence network and its influence with local groups to keep a lid on the chaos. They weren't friends, but they had a common enemy. When the relationship between Paris and Algiers imploded, that fragile security cooperation shattered. Algeria, angered by France's actions, became far less willing to share intelligence or coordinate security efforts. They even closed their airspace to French military planes, a move that severely hampered France's ability to supply its troops and conduct operations in the Sahel. This was a huge blow. Imagine trying to fight a fire and your neighbor, who has the only fire hydrant on the block, decides to turn off the water because you parked in front of their driveway. The consequences are immediate and disastrous for the whole neighborhood. In any international dispute, you have to follow the money. And in the case of France and Algeria, the economic ties are as deep and tangled as their history. France has long been a dominant economic player in Algeria. French companies have been involved in everything from banking and insurance to car manufacturing and the energy sector. This isn't just about trade, it's about a deep, structural integration that has been built over decades. But when the political relationship sours, this economic partnership becomes a powerful weapon, and both sides have shown they are willing to use it. Algeria has started to actively decouple its economy from France. This is a strategic pivot. The Algerian government has been pushing a policy of economic patriotism, which is a polite way of saying, buy from anyone but the French if you can. They have made it more difficult for French companies to win contracts and have reportedly blocked imports of certain French goods. A significant move was the decision to switch the primary foreign language for teaching science in universities from French to English. This isn't just symbolic. It's a long-term strategy to reorient the next generation of Algerian elites away from the French sphere of influence and towards the Anglo-American or Asian worlds. The road to making up. Alright, so things are tense. The relationship is on the rocks. It feels like they're one argument away from deleting each other's numbers. So what's the solution? How do France and Algeria move from this Cold War back to, at the very least, a civil partnership? Well, there's no magic wand, but there are concrete steps both governments could take. The first, and maybe the hardest step, is to separate the emotional, historical issues from the practical, present-day ones. They need to be able to work together on security in the Sahel, even if they disagree about the legacy of colonialism. It's like being able to agree on who pays the electricity bill, even if you're still arguing about who started the fight last night. For this to happen, both sides need to dial down the public rhetoric. The war of words through the media only makes things worse. So here we are, at a crossroads. The showdown between Algeria and France, sparked by a dramatic diplomatic incident but fueled by 132 years of history, has the potential to fundamentally reshape the future of North Africa and its relationship with Europe. And right now, the whole world is watching to see which it will be. Don't forget to subscribe.